Welcome to the Narrated Vendetta. We bring you gripping tales of payback, justice, and reckoning. Let's begin.
My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 59 years old, a widow, and I live in a modest but comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood in coastal Washington, where the scent of pine and salt water always hangs in the air. For nearly 25 years, I've been the office manager at Sterling and Finch Associates, a small law firm that values stability over ambition, a quality I came to cherish. I raised two children, Clara, my daughter who just turned 32, and Daniel, my 29-year-old son. Most of my adult life was a carefully constructed sacrifice, designed to ensure they never had to face the hardships that defined my own youth. Last Tuesday, an email arrived that cleaved my life into a before and after. It was from Clara. There was no subject line, just her name, Clara Vance, sitting starkly in my inbox. A reflexive smile touched my lips before I opened it. We'd just been on the phone a few weeks ago, excitedly discussing her wedding plans. I'd already transferred $30,000 to help her secure the breathtaking mountain lodge in Aspen, book a photographer whose work she adored, and reserve the flowers she'd been following on Instagram since college. I assumed this email was just a quick, happy update, but when I clicked it open, the smile evaporated from my face. The warmth in my chest turned to a block of ice. Mom, that's how it began, not dearest mom or even a simple hi mom, just mom. It was a word that felt less like an address of affection and more like a corporate memo heading. Clara explained, in painstakingly neutral terms, that she, her fiancé Marcus, and his family had finalized the guest list for the ceremony. After what she described as much deliberation, they had collectively decided it would be more appropriate for me to watch the wedding via a private live stream link, not in person. She offered a flimsy justification. Marcus's mother, a woman I'd met only twice, was apparently very particular about the guest count and was insistent on keeping the event exclusive and intimate. The words felt like carefully polished stones, smooth and cold, designed to inflict maximum damage without leaving a visible bruise. Then came the line that felt like a deliberate final twist of the knife, delivered with such breathtaking nonchalance that it sucked the air from my lungs. If you still want to feel like a part of it, you can watch through the link we've set up. Should be just like being there, lol winking face. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. My coffee grew cold beside me. My hands didn't tremble, I didn't have the release of tears. Instead, something deep inside me, a foundational plate of my identity as a mother, quietly and irrevocably cracked. The ground had fractured beneath my feet, but I remained standing, suspended in a new, terrifying silence. I took a slow, deliberate breath, then another. I typed out a reply of just 4 words, sure. Enjoy your big day. No emotion, no argument, just a quiet, formal withdrawal. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that those 4 words would echo with more power than any scream I could have unleashed. I didn't want to fight a battle I had already so clearly lost. I didn't want to shed tears they wouldn't understand. I wanted clarity. I wanted the silence to be my closing argument. I closed the laptop, picked up my now cold coffee, and drank it down in 3 bitter gulps. Then I got ready for work, moving through my morning routine with the robotic precision of a woman on autopilot. But it wasn't just another Tuesday. It was the day I stopped pretending my sacrifices were an investment in love and started seeing them for what they had become, an endlessly exploitable resource. That was the day that world as I knew it ended, and a new one began. The drive to the office that morning was eerily quiet. My mind was a closed loop, circling the same question over and over again. How did we get here? I'd spent nearly a quarter-century at Sterling and Finch. It's not glamorous work, but it's dependable. Stability was the bedrock I needed after my husband, Richard, died of a sudden heart attack, leaving me alone with 2 teenagers and a mountain of uncertainty. I remember one specific evening, standing in front of our clattering old washing machine, the counter buried under a pile of bills. I was trying to figure out how to stretch my paycheck to cover both groceries and the deposit for Clara's first college dorm. Back then, giving up my own life didn't feel like a choice, it felt like a necessity. I didn't think twice about sacrificing my weekends to take on freelance bookkeeping. I canceled the one vacation I had planned for myself, a trip to see the Grand Canyon. I skipped friends' birthdays and anniversaries, always with the same excuse and the same promise to myself, there will be time for me later. But later never came. Every spare dollar, every ounce of extra energy, was poured into Clara and Daniel. When Clara switched her major for the 3rd time and needed an extra year of tuition, I refinanced the house. When she impulsively moved to New York City for a fashion internship that lasted all of 6 months, I paid her security deposit and her cross-country moving expenses without a word of complaint. When she called me sobbing after her second major breakup at 27, I cashed in my personal vacation days, flew to her side, held her hand, and brewed her chamomile tea in a sterile, unfamiliar kitchen that never once felt like a home. When Daniel wanted to buy his first house with his fiancée, I didn't just co-sign the mortgage, I drained a significant portion of my retirement savings to give them a $15,000 check for their down payment. I never once hesitated. I never kept a tally. I never saw it as a debt to be repaid. That's what mothers do, isn't it? You give unconditionally, but that email, with its casual cruelty and dismissive emoji, had recast 30 years of love into a series of cold, hard transactions. I felt like a service provider whose contract had been terminated. I had a shelf life, and it had just expired, and back at the office, my boss, Mr. Harrison, stopped by my desk. He's a kind, older gentleman, one of those rare men who remembers not just your birthday but how you take your coffee. He's a widower himself, and sometimes I think he sees the world with a softer, more perceptive gaze. He immediately knew something was wrong. "Eleanor, you look like you've seen a ghost," he said, placing a warm latte from the cafe downstairs on my desk. His voice was gentle, concerned. A tidal wave of emotion rose in my throat. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to say, my daughter, the one whose graduation photos you have pinned on the office bulletin board, just disinvited me from her wedding via email. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, a lifetime of keeping a brave face took over. I managed a weak smile and said, "Just a rough night's sleep, Robert. Nothing a little caffeine can't fix." He didn't push, but his eyes told me he didn't believe me. That small act of kindness, the coffee, the unspoken understanding, nearly broke me. After the screaming cacophony in my head all morning, it was a quiet reminder that I still existed outside of my role as mom, that I still mattered, even if only to the kind man who bought me coffee on a Tuesday morning. Around lunchtime, my phone, which I'd set to silent, buzzed insistently on my desk. Clara's name lit up the screen, a beacon I had no desire to answer. A string of voicemails and texts followed in rapid succession. "Mom, please pick up. We need to talk about this. This isn't funny." I didn't answer the phone. I didn't listen to a single one. I just sat there, sipping the latte Robert had brought me, and a thought began to crystallize in my mind, sharp and clear. Maybe it's time to stop being the one who always answers. Maybe it's time to stop auditioning for a role in someone else's story, especially when they won't even let you on the stage. That afternoon, I made a decision. It wasn't born of rage or a desire for vengeance. It was born of a profound, chilling clarity. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to act. After work, I didn't drive home. I took a detour and drove to the main branch of Summit Trust Bank, a few blocks down from the office. Mr. Peterson, the branch manager, had been my financial advisor for 15 years. He'd helped me navigate everything from setting up college savings accounts to reallocating my retirement funds after Richard died. He always greeted me with a warm, genuine smile. "Eleanor," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Always a pleasure. What can I help you with today?" I sat down in the leather chair across from him and placed my purse on the floor. My voice, when I spoke, was steady, eerily calm. "I need to cancel a wire transfer, please." He blinked, a flicker of surprise in his professional demeanor. "Of course. The one to the Aspen Mountain Lodge, I presume." "That's the one," I said. Carlos typed something into his computer, his brow furrowed slightly. "There may be a cancellation fee, depending on their policy and the timing," he advised gently. "May I ask the reason for the change?" "Circumstances have changed," I replied, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. I offered no further explanation. He studied his screen for a moment longer. "Well, you're in luck. The transfer was scheduled for tomorrow morning. It hasn't been processed yet. We're just in time." He paused, then looked up, his gaze softening from professional to personal. "Are you absolutely sure, Eleanor? $60,000 is a very significant amount." $60,000. That was the second installment I had promised, on top of the $30,000 that was already gone. A total of $90,000 for a wedding I was deemed unworthy of attending in person. The absurdity of it settled in my bones, not as anger, but as a cold, hard fact. I met his gaze and nodded, a sense of finality washing over me. I signed the necessary cancellation forms, my signature firm in clear.as. I walked out of the bank and into the late afternoon sun. I didn't feel a shred of doubt. I felt a strange and unfamiliar lightness, as if a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. By the time I arrived home, my phone's lock screen was a log of my family's panic. 9 missed calls from Clara. 2 from Daniel, a single ominous voicemail from my son that simply said, "Mom, I don't know what's going on, but you need to call Clara, please don't do this." I turned the phone off completely and left it on the entryway table. I in the kitchen, I walked to the small wine rack and reached for a bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon I'd been saving. It was meant for Thanksgiving last year, but Clara had cancelled her visit at the last minute, a big project at work, she had claimed. I poured a generous glass, took it out to the back porch, and sat in my favorite rocking chair as the sunlight began to fade, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The neighborhood was quiet, punctuated only by the chirping of evening birds and the distant bark of a dog. And in that stillness, the memories came, not as a flood, but as a slow, deliberate parade. All the school plays I attended alone, the holiday dinners where I'd set an extra plate just in case only to clear it away untouched late at night. All the small, invisible sacrifices that had piled up over the years like silent snowdrifts. The new winter coat I didn't buy so Clara could have the designer one she wanted. The used car I drove for 14 years, long after it started making worrying noises. The trip to Italy I had postponed again and again. I thought about Marcus's mother, a woman who knew nothing of the little girl who was afraid of thunderstorms or the teenager who cried for a week when her first hamster died. Yet this stranger's preference for intimacy held more weight than my 32 years of motherhood. Her vision of a perfect family portrait required editing me out. I thought about the callous LOL and the winking emoji, a digital pat on the head to the woman who had bankrolled the very event she was being barred from, and finally, for the first time in a long, long time, I thought about myself. Not as a mother, not as a widow, not as an office manager, but as Eleanor. What did Eleanor want? The answer came, not in a shout, but in a whisper: peace. Dignity. A life that wasn't measured by my utility to people who only remembered I existed when they needed something. Around 9 o'clock that night, the doorbell rang, a jarring sound in the quiet house. My first instinct was to ignore it, but a flicker of morbid curiosity got the better of me. I peered through the peephole and saw my son, Daniel, standing on the porch. He was still in his work clothes, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up, looking agitated. He was holding his phone in one hand like it was a weapon or a shield. I opened the door. "Mom," he said, stepping inside before I had a chance to speak, his voice tight with frustration. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Clara's freaking out." I shut the door calmly, the solid click echoing in the foyer. "Hello to you too, Daniel." He ignored the pleasantry and began pacing the living room floor. "She says you're not coming to the wedding now, but you're pulling your support and being difficult." A short, humorless laugh escaped my lips. "Difficult?" I asked, turning to face him. "I'm being difficult for not wishing to attend a wedding I was explicitly uninvited from?" He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Look, Marcus' parents are footing a huge part of the bill, Mom. You know how traditional and image-conscious they are. They wanted a smaller, more exclusive thing." "Traditional, Daniel?" I raised an eyebrow. I had already paid $30,000 and was about to send another $60,000. That's $90,000. That's not tradition, it's a business transaction. And apparently my attendance wasn't part of the deal. He stopped pacing and froze, the color drained from his face. "Wait, you were sending another $60,000? In total?" I said, taking a slow sip of my wine. "But not anymore." Daniel looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. "Mom, they're counting on that money. The venue, the caterer, the orchestra, that pays for almost everything." "It's not my problem anymore," I said, my voice dangerously even. His voice rose, laced with disbelief and anger. "Of course it's your problem. She's your daughter. And I am her mother," I replied, my voice dropping to a quiet, steely tone. A mother who was told to stay home and watch her daughter's life from behind a screen like a stranger. He ran a hand through his hair, genuinely distressed now. "You always do this. You always make everything about you." And that was it. That was the line, the one that severed the final, frayed thread of maternal obligation. All the years of self-denial, all the silent sacrifices, all of it erased by that one selfish, unthinking accusation. "Get out of my house," my voice was soft, but it carried the unyielding weight of a collapsing mountain. "What?" "You heard me, Daniel. Get out." "Mom, be reasonable." "No," I said, setting my wine glass down with a firm click. "I have been reasonable for 32 years. I've been accommodating. I've been a bottomless well of support and money and time, and I am done being cast as the villain in a story I wrote with nothing but love. So you can go back to your sister and tell her, the bank is closed." Daniel stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. For a long second, he seemed poised to argue further, but something in my eyes must have stopped him. He turned without another word and walked out. The front door clicked shut behind him, a sound that felt louder and more final than any slam. I stood alone in the center of my living room, my heart pounding a fierce, triumphant rhythm against my ribs, and I realized something. Startling, I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I felt free. The next morning, I woke up to a staggering 43 missed calls and a long, scrolling stream of frantic messages from Clara. They began with passive-aggressive guilt trips. "Mom, we need to talk. Why are you doing this to us? This is so childish." Then, as the reality of her financial situation must have set in, the tone shifted dramatically to sheer panic. "The venue just called me. The final payment didn't go through. We're going to lose the entire deposit if we don't pay the full balance by tomorrow." A few hours later, Marcus' parents are furious. They said, "This just proves they were right about you all along. And the one that came at 3:24 a.m., the one that I actually found grimly amusing, I just don't understand why you're doing this to me." I smiled as I sipped my morning coffee. Of course, she didn't understand. Clara had grown up with my sacrifices, woven so seamlessly into the fabric of her life that she'd never had to look at the seams. She never questioned where the comfort, the security, and the stability came from. She just assumed it would always be there, that I would always be there. But not this time. Later that morning, as I was reviewing contracts at my desk, a new email popped up in my personal inbox. The subject line was practically dripping with melodrama: "Please don't ruin my wedding." I opened it with a sense of detached curiosity. "Mom," she wrote, "I know you're upset about the live stream situation. But this response is extreme. We've lost the venue deposit already, and if we don't pay the remaining balance by the end of the day Paris time, because the parent company is in France, the caterer walks. Marcus' parents are beyond upset. They're saying this proves you can't be reasoned with and that you're unstable. Please just don't do this. We can talk about you attending the ceremony, but we need the funds sent first." There it was, in black and white, the carrot on the stick. They were willing to talk about letting me attend now that the money had vanished. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a moment of horrified self-reflection. It was a negotiation. It was a hostage situation where my love was the ransom, as if my presence at my own daughter's wedding was a commodity that could be bartered for, its value entirely dependent on my generosity. I didn't respond. I simply closed the email and turned back to the contract on my screen, its clear, logical clauses a soothing balm on my frayed emotions. Around noon, Robert Harrison stopped by my desk again. "Lunch," he offered with a gentle smile. That new Italian place on the corner just opened up, my treat. My automatic response, honed by years of habit, was to decline. Lunch was a luxury, an expense, a block of time I usually spent at my desk catching up. But something in me had shifted. Maybe it was the crystalline clarity of the past 24 hours. Maybe I just desperately needed to sit in a space that asked for nothing from me. So I nodded. "I'd like that very much, Robert." Over plates of pasta and bread, he told me about his grandchildren and how chasing after them was both exhausting and the single greatest joy of his life. His eyes were kind, and his presence was calming. After a while, he paused and looked at me with that same gentle perception from the morning. "Forgive me for saying so, Eleanor, but you seem lighter today. Like a storm has passed." I surprised myself. The walls I had so carefully maintained for decades crumbled, and I told him everything, about Clara and Daniel, the email, the live stream, the $90,000, and the quiet, decisive action I had taken at the bank. I laid it all out, expecting judgment or, at the very least, a polite but awkward silence. He didn't judge. He didn't offer simplistic solutions. He just listened. When I finished, he reached across the table and briefly squeezed my hand. "Sometimes, the hardest part of love is setting boundaries," he said softly, "especially with the people to whom we've given the most. I think you did the right thing, Eleanor, for you." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I believed it too. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, the porch light clicked on automatically, casting a welcoming glow. Everything looked peaceful, but there was someone sitting on my front steps, a small figure silhouetted against the light. As I got closer, my heart skipped a beat. It was Chloe. Chloe had been Clara's best friend since the 5th grade. She had spent countless weekends at our house, a second daughter to me. We'd baked cookies, watched movies, and I'd listened to their whispered secrets and giggles long into the night. I hadn't seen her in years, not since Clara had decided her old friends weren't sophisticated enough for her new life. She stood up quickly, her expression nervous. "Mrs. Vance," she said softly, "I am so sorry to just show up like this." "It's all right, Chloe," I replied, my voice softer than I expected. I unlocked the door. "Would you like some tea?" She followed me into the familiar kitchen, her eyes darting around as if seeing ghosts in every corner. "She's a complete mess," Chloe said without preamble as I filled the kettle. "They lost the venue, the florist dropped them, Marcus' parents are threatening to pull out of the whole thing. She's panicking." "And she sent you?" I asked, my voice flat. Chloe shook her head. "No. I came on my own." I'm here to ask, is there anything she could possibly say or do that would make you change your mind? I paused, the kettle whistling in the background. Was there? Would a tearful, desperate apology erase the sting of being told to watch my daughter's vows on a laptop? Would it change the fact that I was treated like an ATM until the moment the cash stopped flowing? I looked at Chloe's earnest, worried face. No, I said quietly. I don't think there is. Her shoulders sagged. But even if she apologizes? Words are easy, Chloe, I said, handing her a mug of tea, especially when people are desperate. The people who truly love you don't wait until you're walking away to finally see you. She looked down into her mug, nodding slowly. I get it, she whispered. Even if she doesn't. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Vance, for all of this. I have nothing to be sorry for, I replied. She hugged me before she left, a tight, heartfelt embrace that conveyed everything she couldn't say. As I watched her walk back into the night, I closed the door not just on the cold evening air but on a version of myself I had finally, blessedly outgrown. The lavish Aspen wedding never happened. According to a strained, brief phone call from Daniel weeks later, Clara and Marcus ended up having a small, subdued ceremony in his parents' backyard. I wasn't invited. This time, I didn't care. Clara sent one final, long-winded email. It was a rambling, incoherent mess, part self-pitying apology, part bitter justification, filled with accusations about how I had humiliated her. I read it once, archived it, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just done. There is a profound and strange peace that comes with letting go. Not in a blaze of fury, but in a moment of quiet clarity. Now, for the first time in decades, I started waking up without an inventory of who might need something from me. I woke up without bracing for the next guilt trip disguised as a request. I made a new rule for myself: if my presence is negotiable, then my effort is optional. I go to work. I leave at 5. I've joined a pottery class, delighting in the simple, messy act of creating something with my own 2 hands. I have dinner with old friends who see me, not what I can do for them. I am planning a trip to Italy for me. The greatest lesson in this painful chapter of my life is one I wish I had learned much sooner: you do not have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Sometimes the most powerful, defiant, and necessary act of love is the love you finally, unapologetically give to yourself.